Welcome to Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers, a once-a-week show covering all things Buffalo Sabres and NHL hockey. We thank you for joining us today, and to make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, be sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube, follow and share us on Facebook, and catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com and on our Twitter feed. You can find us at Saberscoop, THW, and everything else at The Hockey Writer. And make sure you head over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter so you don't miss out on the latest and weirdest hockey news every day. Brandon, let's introduce our guests.
Absolutely. Our guests today are Avery McGrail, who covers the tongue twister, Colorado Avalanche for the Hockey Writers, and Colton Pankiw, who is a co-host on the THW show Oilers Overtime. So we got very exciting teams to cover here, and I chose these teams very, on purpose because one swept another team and the other was swept. So it's going to be a very interesting conversation. But before we get into that, we got a lot of stuff to cover. So we've assembled this panel to talk more Stanley Cup playoffs action since, well, there still isn't much Sabres news to cover for very obvious reasons. But there are a few things we'd like to talk about, Jordan. So if you could, there was a very interesting thing that that both caught both of our eyes earlier today. And why don't you take it away?
Yeah, of course. So let's just get right into the Sabres news. And this is coming from John Orand on Twitter. So the top NHL local TV markets this season in order. Number one was Pittsburgh. Number two was Las Vegas. Number three was St. Louis. The reason this is notable is because this is the first time in at least 12 years Sabres games on MSG Plus are not in the top two in this category. So that was a 35% drop in the steepest in the league. And I want to just ask you guys, having covered teams in Colorado and Edmonton when times were pretty bad, specifically from 2005 to 2015, have you ever seen this sort of detachment from a team and a fan base? And a follow up would be, how do fans get reinvested in it? Is there a way out of this? Is there a way?
I think
Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's pretty simple. I think winning cures all wounds. The fan base in Colorado was very detached like 4 or 5 years ago when the team was just awful. But now they're winning again. Stadium's rocking. Ratings are up. Everything. So all you got to do is put a good team on the ice and the rest will follow. It's that simple, right?
Yeah, totally. And what do you think, Colton? Is there anything specific you have to add to that?
Yeah, I think part of it is maybe being in a Canadian market. I think despite the struggles, the Oilers were still selling out. I mean, they had like a long streak for a bunch of years, and it did actually come to an end, I think, in 2016 maybe. So fans were starting to slowly get detached. But I think just being in a Canadian market was a big part. I think if they were in basically anywhere in the States, it would have been a lot different because, I mean, they picked first overall 3 years in a row. So there was some pretty dark years there. But yeah, I think being in a Canadian market helped them with that quite a bit.
Yeah, Jordan, I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts. Do you have anything on this?
Well, I mean, I'm also a Leafs fan as well, noticeably, as you can tell by my half Sabres, half Leafs background here. And, I mean, Edmonton fans have seen this as well. There were bags being thrown into the ice at the lowest points for both franchises. And for Buffalo, although it does seem like quite a steep, it's been a decade without the playoffs. The fans are going to be back when the team's better. We've seen it at its heights. Like the Buffalo Sabres have one of the best hockey markets when the team is doing well. You saw that in 2006. You've seen it before in their runs in 1999. I think they'll be back. They just need to put a team in front of the ice that's watchable, in my opinion. And hopefully that's at least going to happen somewhat soon, right?
Absolutely, hopefully. And with some, bright and young prospects coming up in the pipeline, hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe that will happen sooner than later, but they got a long road ahead of them. But, I mentioned the prospects because Sabres prospect Aaron Huglin, I believe that's how you pronounce it, was a co-recipient for the Ace Brand MVP award for the Fargo Force in the USHL for the 2021 season. So he won this trophy alongside his teammate, the goaltender Brennan Boyden. And this type of format, two players winning an award, especially from the same, on the same team, that's not really seen in the NHL. So I just wanted to sort of create a fun little hypothetical here. Since we don't see this in the NHL, let's say, should two players be able to win an award, especially when you have such tight races, like, maybe not when there's a runaway winner like Connor McDavid for the Hart, or something like that, but maybe for, like a Norris Trophy candidate or something. So for example, like we've never seen two players win the Hart Trophy in the same year. But there's some trophies where in tandem, such as the Jennings Trophy with goaltenders, they win it, both of them for lowest, goals given up. So let's just pose the question. I'll go to Jordan first. Should the NHL consider allowing that in the future? Just sort of a fun, totally like, twist to throw into the awards process that kind of gets stale, every now and then.
Would definitely add a different element to the conversation surrounding these trophies. Like there could be arguments maybe to be made when the year that Leon Draisaitl won, that Connor McDavid could have won it with him. That's a conversation that could be had if there could be a precedent that follows if that happens. But honestly, I don't know if we would actually see something like this in the National Hockey League. I don't think this is the type of league that would impose something like that, but I'm curious to get your take on it. Let's start with Avery.
Yeah, I don't think that would make sense for the Hart Trophy per se, but I'm a little more open to it with the Norris. I definitely think Cale Makar and Devon Toews could share the Norris this year. They've been that good. That comes to mind. Just when you think about good defensive pairings, like maybe there should be an award for that because teamwork is an essential part of hockey. It's not just individual play. So I could see some merit in that. But I could also just see the awards process becoming even more convoluted, which is not something hockey writers need. They already struggle.
Totally. And any last thoughts on that, Colton?
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty tough to have two for one award. I think it would just, like Avery said, I think it would make it even more confusing, have people even more upset than they already are with whoever wins. But I do think for the Norris Trophy, I've always because it always seems to just go to usually the top offensive defenseman or one of them. So I would like to see an award that would kind of go to the league's best defensive defenseman. I think that's been something that's been missing for a long time. Like you have the Selke for forwards, so kind of just something like that recognizes guys that are really good in their own end and just that are not just putting up points at the offensive end.
Yeah, totally. And I think with that, we're going to reset the show because we got a lot of playoff hockey to talk about. So with that in mind, you're watching Sabres Scoop presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube, follow and share us on Facebook, and catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com and on our Twitter feed at Sabres Scoop TH. So let's get right into this with Avery. We're talking about the Colorado Avalanche, and they were just so dominant in that first round series against the St. Louis Blues, swept, outscoring them by 20-7 in terms of goals, completely shut them down, and took over the series really from game one. So let's just get into a few questions here. Obviously, the biggest storyline kind of to emerge from that series was the suspension of Nazem Kadri. Especially there's so many directions we could go with this, but I just want to know the first question. Where is he slotting back into the lineup when returning? Is it going to be in his normal 2C spot?
Well, first of all, you have to assume that the Avalanche are still alive by the time he does come back. He had his appeal with Gary Bettman today. He was trying to get his sentence reduced. I don't think that will happen. And right now it's at 8 games. He's got about 6 left. So that could get down to 5 games. So we could see him in game 3 if things went really well for him. But I don't think that's going to happen. But as for where he would slot in, I think he would go right back to his 2C spot. He's a very good play driver. He got a little unlucky this year, especially as the year went on, and that really messed with his confidence. And so it was kind of a never-ending cycle for him in these last 20 games is that he would do something good and it wouldn't work out, and then he would do something bad and it would get worse, and just on and on. He started to get confidence back maybe 5 games before the playoffs started, started to roll a little bit again, and then he was awful in game 1. And then he started to look better in game 2, and then he tried to murder Justin Falk, which was not okay. So he's definitely on thin ice, I would say, with the coaching staff. I don't know that for sure, but if I were the coach of the Colorado Avalanche, I would be very disappointed with the way he played. But the fact of the matter is he's still one of Colorado's top 6 skaters. He's a very good player, and very few disagree with that. And he's talented enough to make a very big difference if and when he does return. So I think that's where he'll slot in the number 2C position.
Obviously, being a Leafs fan, we've seen a lot of Kadri suspensions back in the day. Even before the playoff series, he was getting suspended way before then, back when he was a rookie. But I just want to know kind of the perception he's receiving among the fan base at the moment. Do you think there's a lot of fans that kind of want to see him traded in the offseason? Or do you think he would have to do it again in order to really solidify that like it happened in Toronto?
Yeah, the exile Nazem Kadri movement in Colorado is getting a lot of steam in the past couple weeks. But that's just fans being overreactionary. Some of them are saying leave him exposed to Seattle. That wouldn't gain them anything in return. That's not a good idea. The same with trading him. He's got a couple years left on his contract. It's a very affordable deal, and it gives time for Alex Newhook, who has been playing recently, to keep developing and become the next 2C of this team in a few years. So his role on the team makes sense, and he belongs with this current iteration of the Avalanche. It's just a matter of will he redeem himself in the eyes of the fans this postseason and beyond.
Yeah, of course, I agree with everything you're saying there, Avery. And let's just get right into this. And I want to talk about Nathan MacKinnon, and the way he can elevate his game in the playoffs, because obviously the rules are called completely differently come playoff time. Extra slashes are called extra. The rules just basically go out the window, especially in these other playoff series. I've noticed. I just want to know, but this guy still prevails. He's still leading the NHL in playoff points. And of course, that conversation is being sparked again. Oh, is he better than Connor McDavid? I don't know if we have to go that far at the moment. I don't think they're comparable. But how does this guy elevate his game in the playoffs so much, despite all of the factors surrounding him? How is he this good still?
I've never seen a player quite as angry as Nathan MacKinnon is. He just plays with so much outward frustration when things aren't going his way. But instead of that bogging him down, like maybe it would with Kadri, and getting in his head, that just fuels him to solve the problem and solve it dramatically. And so in the playoffs, when things start to amp up and the emotion gets bigger, that's when his drive gets even bigger. He starts performing in big moments that gives him confidence, or something goes bad in the big moments and that makes him angry, which gives him motivation. And so whether things are going well or going poorly, Nathan MacKinnon is going to respond. He's a really good leader in that respect. That's why he's not the captain per se, because he's maybe too emotional to be the voice of reason. I think Gabriel Landeskog's a great compliment for him in that. But there are very few things like playoff Nathan MacKinnon. It's why he's third in points per game all time in the postseason, behind Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. This Colorado Avalanche team is just so deep. I still can't believe they got Devon Toews. I know you mentioned him earlier for 2 second-round picks. I don't know what Lou Lamoriello was doing there. I know the Islanders are doing pretty good, but the way they assembled their lines and the way his player evaluation is just insane. You can just insert Alex Newhook into the lineup. He's an impact player. Connor Timmins is another guy who didn't play for a year, and he's starting to really get back into the lineup and is producing well. And with that in mind, the Avalanche are set to play the winner of the Minnesota Wild and Vegas Golden Knights series. That one is going to Game 7. It's going to be so tight. You have to imagine Vegas probably prevails there, but we'll have to see. It's kind of reminiscent of the San Jose Vegas series in 2019. I've been hearing from Sharks fans. So I just want to know, what are your predictions for that series? And what is the Avalanche's outlook on these potential opponents?
Yeah, Vegas might be blowing it a little bit here. They've kind of had a problem the past few postseasons since they went to the Cup. They're 2-8 in games where they had a chance to clinch a series, which is not good. So tomorrow they are going to be back at home. T-Mobile Arena is going to be rocking again. It's been great to see all those fans there. The Minnesota Wild have never lost a Game 7, I would note, because they won 2 series against the Avalanche, both in 2014 and 2003. Not great stuff. Made Patrick Waugh retire. Very sad stuff. I think the moment might get to Vegas a little bit. All these expectations, just the sheer amount of dominance they had in the regular season, just kind of on cruise control. And all of a sudden you have this series in your grasp, and suddenly it's not in your grasp anymore. So seeing how they respond to that is going to be really big for me. I like Mark Stone a lot as a player. He's one of my favorite players in the National Hockey League. But does he step up and have that star moment in this Game 7? Is Max Pacioretty able to play? Because that could make a really big difference. As for the Wild, I love Kirill Kaprizov and Kevin Fiala. Those dudes are ballers. And I like them. I like the Wild a lot to come out of that series. I really do. I think they've pushed Vegas emotionally here in these past few days. And that's a big part of the playoffs. It's hard to calculate statistically. It's hard to determine and predict well, but when it takes a factor, it's a really big deal.
Awesome. Very well said. That would be a heck of a series, Avalanche Wild. I would really like to tune into that, but the Vegas would be just an equally great matchup.
Yeah, either way, it's going to be great. Sorry if I talked too long.
No, not at all. But Colton, we did not forget about you. It is time to talk about the Edmonton Oilers. And like I said, we did this very purposefully. We have the Avalanche who went into the playoffs, found instant success, 4 straight wins, and they're moving on to the next round. And the Oilers, we actually had a Winnipeg Jets writer on here last week, and he was saying, you know what, even though the Jets took game 1, I really expect that to be the only game they win. They might basically, lose the next 4, and the Oilers come out on top here. And that is just not what happened. And as each game went on, I just sat there and I was like, is this really happening? Are the Oilers really not going to win a game? And it happened. So disappointing game 1 loss by score of 4-1. The next 3 games, 3 straight games went into OT. So 2, 3, 4 all went into OT. Ultimately, the Oilers, ended up losing, but all were very close games by all stretches. So before we go on to some major storylines from the series, Colton, can I just get collect your general thoughts as an Oilers fan watching this and what you were thinking? Did you ever think there was a moment, okay, they've got to turn it around, or was the play just dictating this is not going to be their year? Like, what was going through your mind?
There's a few things. I think obviously it kind of just emphasized how good Connor Hellebuck is. I mean, everyone knew that, but just he was incredible. But as far as sweeps go, it wasn't like a Colorado over the Blues where they just really ran them over. I seen a stats that the Oilers led in the series, had the lead for 60 minutes, or Winnipeg only for 19. So it was kind of just one of those things. Like you said, 3 games went into overtime, just 3 bounces. But I mean, there's a lot of things. Obviously, it was their second year in a row losing out to a team that they were heavily favored over. Last year was the Blackhawks in the play-in round. So I think it just emphasizes the need to get depth there. Obviously, everyone knows they have McDavid and Draisaitl. After that, there's Nugent Hopkins, and then not a lot. So I think they have some cap space this offseason. I think they're really going to need to and look to address that.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the biggest things, garnered a lot of, mean sort of, in good spirit, but pretty mean comments about reminiscent of the 2013 Maple Leafs collapse against the Boston Bruins. Right. So the Edmonton Oilers, what they did was they had a 4-1 lead in the third. They blew the lead, lost the game in OT. This isn't something that it's not like it's super rare. This happens all the time. But when it happens on this sort of scale into a team like the Oilers, people love to poke fun. So what were you thinking? Did that game specifically? Can I gather your thoughts on that? And when it finally went the way of the Jets, what were you thinking?
Yeah, like you said, it's kind of the classic Oilers. They've been the punching bag for a while now. So yeah, it was tough. It started out with just a really bad and unnecessary penalty. Josh Archibald, he ended up getting suspended for it too. They're up 4-1 at that point, like you said, and then they scored. Winnipeg scored on the power play, and it kind of just spiraled out of control from there. I think that was the turning point of the series. I think if they stay up in that game, they probably come back and win, or at least make it a lot closer than it was. I think they were so deflated after that, and even though they brought game 4 into overtime, you could just it felt like that in those entire 3 overtimes, it was just a matter of time before Winnipeg ended it. So yeah, that's a tough one. I guess a positive spin there trying to put on it is it's a good learning experience. Obviously the fan base doesn't want to hear that right now, but yeah, it was just a tough and crazy game.
Yeah, it's a learning experience, and especially for their most talented players, right? You mentioned McDavid and Draisaitl, and these are 2 guys who, by no means were they, they were both point per game. So Draisaitl 5 points, McDavid 4 points. So they were both point per game or above. But for them, the expectations are so astronomically high that even that is not good enough. And of course, they were kept off the board in game 1 as well. What do you think about their performances individually? Do you think they did enough? Do you think they were just, really, really shut down really well by the Jets defense? What do you think it was? And does the Oilers game really begin and end with McDavid and Draisaitl?
Well, they were actually shut down for the first 2 games, which was just anyone who would have seen that coming. I think, yeah, like you said, they were point per game or Draisaitl just over, but they really weren't very good. And I know that seems crazy, but just what everyone's come to expect of them. But McDavid in game 3 in that collapse gave up had a terrible rim around the boards that resulted in the tying goal. And then in game 4, when they lost in overtime, he was the one who tried to chip to get it deep and just failed to do so. So they really weren't very good at all. And I don't think that's anything to worry about. I think if anything with the guy like McDavid, that'll have him coming back next season 1 and to just do even more. But yeah, I think the thing with the whole McDavid Draisaitl is a little overblown at times. I think the team has improved somewhat. They're still trying to get pieces in from, they have all these bad contracts from Montreal who's in charge. So like I said, they get some more cap space this offseason, and I think it'll be interesting to see what Holland does to try and add some pieces and turn them around.
Speaking of Ken Holland and next season, he I don't want to say came under fire, but definitely under some sort of scrutiny for his comments at the trade deadline about when he said this isn't an all-in year, is what he said. And people are criticizing that, saying, oh, well, every year should be an all-in year, especially when you have these type of players on your team. So do you agree with that? Do you agree that this wasn't an all-in year? Because I thought the Oilers played very well, kind of consistently all season, which is something they've struggled with, even with these guys on their team. So your personal thoughts on that?
Yeah, so to me, I think it was a combination of things. I think it was, again, like the cap space. Like they had guys like James Neal tied up, Mikko Koskinen, who I think they'll look to get rid of both this offseason, whether it's buyouts, trading them, whatever they can do. So I think that he really seen that this team just wasn't quite ready this year. And last year, too, he had traded, like he didn't have a ton of picks this year. He kind of got burned last year. He gave up 2 second-rounders for Athanasiou, and then COVID came, and so it was just it was one of those things where I think he didn't have a lot of assets to give up, and I think he really did think that this team just wasn't quite good enough this year and kind of wanted to wait another year. They still have some really good young prospects. They have Evan Bouchard, who will likely step in this next season, and a couple other guys. So I think this next year at the deadline would be kind of more of the one I would look for them to make a push.
All right. Yeah. And one last thing here about the Oilers before we cover some general NHL news and get your guys' thoughts on some other cool stuff going on in the NHL, some other series. Last question about the Oilers here. I have not bought into all the nonsense about McDavid's future with the Oilers being in question. And maybe it's part of me covering the Sabres, not wanting to believe the same about Jack Eichel, but that seems a lot more likely than McDavid leaving. So, but let's just hear it. Do you think McDavid's future is in jeopardy with this team at this point, having been on the team since 2015 to 16 season, not having much playoff success, and really no playoff success at all, but they have been there a few times. What do you think personally? Is it in jeopardy at all, or is this all just rumor mill drama?
I think it's more rumor. I think since the second he was drafted, you heard a lot of media saying with the lottery balls and everything, he didn't look excited. And whether or not that was the case, I think he's done a good job of saying, and I don't think it's just lip service. I think he means it, that he does want to stay there and ride this thing through. I think he's wants to go down as one of the best players ever, and I don't think he wants to be known as a guy that jumped ship to have to win a championship. So I think he'll still give it some time. That being said, if things don't turn around in a few years, I would be a bit more nervous. Right now, I'm not. I do think the team, despite the sweep, I still think that they are looking a lot better than they did just a few years ago. They have some good pieces. Obviously, they have a really good core with Nurse, Draisaitl, McDavid. So I think it's just about finding guys to play with them. So I still think he's going to give it some time. I'm not too worried yet.
Yes, and with that, we can head into our general NHL news because there's a lot to talk about. And let's start with Washington. They lost 4 straight in the series with Boston as the Bruins took it in 5 games. And the big key storyline really regarding this team heading into the offseason is the future of Alex Ovechkin. He needs to be re-signed. And how much would you give this guy at the age of 34? I'm just curious because obviously he's going to try to trace Gretzky's goal total, goal record. And the team really needs to figure out what their future is here because they acquired Anthony Mantha for such an astronomical price. It clearly didn't go. He's obviously been okay, but I don't necessarily know if I think the results would have been similar under Jacob Verana. I don't know if you need to move out that first round pick. There's clearly goaltending issues there. There's something just seems to be off with the Capitals. So I just want to know what you guys think. What's Alex Ovechkin worth in this type of market? And I'm going to start with you, Brandon.
I heard he wants over 10. That's something I've seen on Twitter. I'm not sure if that's reflective actually of what's really going on. Oftentimes it's not, but I'm not sure I would give him that. I think if honestly, like 8 million would probably be a bargain for a player like Ovechkin, even at his advanced age. I think that's probably appropriate. As far as term, I really don't know. Is he looking at like a 4 to 5 year type thing? I'm not sure. Is it with the Capitals? I think he said it was going to be. And I couldn't see him in another jersey, but then again, weirder things have happened. So I'd say around 4 to 5 years, 8 million per. And anybody else got anything, Avery?
Yeah, 10 million is a lot to give up in a flat cap era that we're in. but it is Alex Ovechkin, so you have to put that into consideration. But they got a lot of dudes there making a lot of money. Like Backstrom has a big contract, Oshie has a big contract, Kuznetsov has a big contract, and they don't like him anymore, so that's not good. Mantha has a big contract. Like their books are not cheap. So if you do extend Ovechkin and you're locked into this aging core, like Mantha was one of their youngest players, and he's 26, 29, I don't remember. But if you lock yourself into this core, like you could lock yourself into losing in 5 in the first round for the next couple of years. And is that really what they want to do as an organization? I would be skeptical. So shelling out $10 million, like there is worse things to do. Like Ovechkin has done so much for hockey in DC. I think if he did $10 million, it would only be for a couple years. But you might be stunting the future of your hockey team to celebrate the past, per se.
And do you have any last thoughts on that, Colton?
Yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying, but at the same time, I think the fact that he got them their cup and it's Alex Ovechkin, you hope just as their captain and everything, and that they haven't had a ton of playoff success outside of that 2017-18 season. You hope that he wouldn't want to handcuff the organization, but I think he holds all the cards here, and whatever he asks for, I think they give it to him. I don't think they're in a position to not pay him. I think just they want to see him break that goals record, and I can't imagine them letting the best player to ever play in their uniform let go. So I think whatever, at the end of the day, whatever he demands, he will get.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. Think about what Alex Ovechkin has done for the city of Washington in terms of just really reinstating how great they've been. You know, they were coming off such a dreadful era where Jaromir Jagr was on the team, and we all know how kind of poorly that went. Maybe some fans forget that, but Alex Ovechkin, you know, when they won that 2004 draft lottery, has been just above and beyond, exceeded all expectations that could have even been had for a first overall pick. Like he potentially could catch Wayne Gretzky. You know, like it's unbelievable what he's done in his career. But they need to build a team around him at this point, because obviously you need to have play drivers playing with Alex Ovechkin. And at this moment in time, I don't know if Yevgeny Kuznetsov is that player. And there's obviously tons of trade rumors circulating with him. We've heard of all sorts of rumors. We're not going to necessarily get into those. But I just want to know where you guys could potentially see him ending up. I think two teams I'm interested in are the Montreal Canadiens and Calgary Flames. They're teams that could use center depth. There's a lot more out there. Obviously, the issue is his $8 million cap hit. I don't know how many teams are going to be willing to take that. There could be some salary retention. Let's start with you, Colton. Where do you think Yevgeny Kuznetsov is going?
Yeah, I liked the first one you said with the Flames. I think that is one of the better chances in the league. I mean, obviously there's some teams that will have quite a bit of cap room that could come into play, but the other one is just given his cap hits and obviously these off ice incidents that you had mentioned, and just you've heard stories that his management isn't very happy with him. I'd be curious to see if maybe they consider leaving him exposed in the Seattle draft. I know it sounds crazy with how talented of a player he is, but he's just so frustrating. Like a few years ago, he was regarded as one of the better players in the league, I think, and he's really just fallen off these last 2-3 seasons, and sounds like more of a headache at this point than anything else.
What do you think, Brandon?
Whenever I think of a player who's like more offensive minded, offensively talented, who's from the Eastern Conference, I always think, oh, he would fit really well on like a Western Conference team, like one of the 3 California teams, or maybe even like I don't know. Vegas comes up in every single conversation now, kind of like they're like the Toronto of the West. I don't know though. I think a team. Well, obviously a team that has the money to afford them. So I actually am thinking like one of those California teams that are sort of looking to re-inject some sort of, offensive talent into their organizations, because all 3 of them are kind of lacking in that area right now. So maybe I'm going to say one of the California teams as a dark horse.
And Avery, do you have any last comments? Any out of the box predictions you think with Kuznetsov?
I heard someone speculate about Columbus the other day, and that made a lot of sense. That they got the money. They could definitely use a player like him on their roster. So I think that could be a good spot. I also like the California teams, like we talked about. I don't see him going to a contender just with the price tag. There's just not that much room cap space wise in the NHL right now. So I like more of the bottom tier teams looking to get him and get some access in return as well.
100%. Yep. And so while the Caps playoff story has ended this season, there are a couple of teams, the Boston Bruins and the New York Islanders, that are still in it. I'm actually excited for this series. I think this one is shaping up to be good for a couple of reasons. One, because I actually didn't have the Islanders coming out of that series against the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm not sure that many people did, or maybe I'm wrong about that, but you did? There we go. Look, see, there's something. I thought they were sort of the underdog, but it was cool to see them do it in 6 games, no less. So the Islanders going up against the Bruins. We know New York can trap teams, sort of, playing their style of hockey, that Barry Trotz style. Taylor Hall, though, ever since he left the Buffalo Sabres and decided he wanted to be good again, has rejuvenated the Bruins squad offensively. So what are your series predictions? Jordan, let's start with you.
Well, I just gotta say, man, I'm never betting against the New York Islanders again, at least until maybe the second or third round, because obviously the quality of competition really raises the bar. But I see what Avery was going for there, and I do think the Boston Bruins really do have a path here to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. I do think this will be probably a 6 or 7 game series. I don't think it'll be as easy for Boston as Washington really was in the first round. I think Taylor Hall still even has another level he could reach in this playoffs. You could still see more from that top scoring line. You're seeing a lot of depth contributors there. I know Matthew Barzal is pretty amazing. I don't know how he's necessarily going to fare in this series. And if you can shut him down, then I don't know. There's just a lot of options here for this team. Ilya Sorokin, is a younger goaltender in this league. He doesn't necessarily have that playoff experience that will necessarily allow for him maybe to make all the saves needed down the stretch. I do think that we could see kind of his inexperience show. And yeah, so in my opinion, I'm saying the Boston Bruins are taking this in 6 games. I'm curious what you think there, Avery.
I liked your opening statement. You wouldn't bet against the New York Islanders, and was betting against the New York Islanders. That's pretty funny. Good stuff. Yeah, I have a hard time betting against Barry Trotz in the playoffs the past few years. He's just got it going over there in New York, and then before that in DC. That being said, I like the Bruins a lot in this series. I did not like the style of team or the way they were playing before the trade deadline. But that Taylor Hall trade has really brought them to life. Everyone knows that. But they're playing a really fun style of hockey. I also like their addition of Mike Riley at the deadline. I think he's a really good defenseman. And they've got Tuukka Rask as well. So you could make an argument they're better than the New York Islanders at each positional group, which is usually a recipe for success. But you can't know that for sure. I would say Barry Trotz has them better in the coaching department, so maybe that's all it takes. I don't know, but I will say Boston in 7.
Yeah. All right, Colton, any last predictions here?
Yeah, I think like Avery had touched on it. I think the Bruins are better in every category. Having said that, I think that's the case with the Islanders in pretty much every matchup they've had in the playoffs over the last few years. It's crazy. Like outside of Barzal, there's really not a lot there on paper, but you guys touched on it. Like Barry Trotz just seems to, the system he's brought in there clearly works. I mean, it worked in Washington too. He got a cup in his year there. Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Islanders do just shock everyone again. That being said, I like the Bruins too. I think like just when I was doing my bracket and everything, I had the Bruins going a long ways, and I really like them against the Islanders. Like Avery said, I think I'll take them in 7.
Yeah, I agree with you guys there. And kind of the same way that Connor McDavid probably should be winning the Hart Trophy almost every season, Barry Trotz should really be winning the Jack Adams Trophy almost every season. Like the fact that he's getting guys like Leo Komarov was on their first line at the moment, and they're completely utilizing every player on that roster just completely outperforms their expectation. It just ceases to amaze me. Give it to their goalie coach too. Mitch Korn, I believe is his name. Like that guy has just been fantastic at getting the best out of all the goaltenders that have now been swapped in out of the last few years, because they've just all been like Vezina caliber. It's just crazy. But we've heard a lot. These guys are doing great. And now we got to segue into the great one, because Wayne Gretzky is joining Turner Sports next season in a broadcasting role. Specifically, the great one will offer studio analysis during key moments of the NHL regular season and throughout the Stanley Cup Playoffs. So you might not necessarily see him on a Wednesday night randomly in the regular season, but you're going to see him in those big moments. It's going to be absolutely huge. In hockey, it is so rare to see former star players step into these roles. It's usually the third or fourth line guys. Maybe sometimes you get a guy like Patrick Sharp, who is pretty good, but more often it's a guy like Dominic Moore. And it's just so awesome to really see Wayne agree to this, And I just want to really bring this out there, this question. How do we see him doing in a broadcasting role? And will he be entertaining enough like the other TNT panels that we've seen in the NBA? Because clearly they're going to try their best. This is TNT. They're not just going to let them. This isn't going to be like Hockey Night in Canada, guys. It has to be something different. That's why they paid the big bucks. That's why the NHL wants this. What do you see happening? Let's start with Brandon.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I was hoping that Gretzky, agreed to do this, or they asked him to do it, and thank God it finally did. It finally panned out, because just the name recognition alone. I mean, you ask anybody, in the United States who is outside of a hockey city, if they know any hockey players, and they'll say Gretzky, and that's pretty much it. And just that name recognition alone should be enough to get it, because you want more eyes, you want more people to get into the game, you want more people to understand the game and get into hockey. That's why, say what you will about Stephen A. Smith and him talking about hockey on ESPN recently, but it's a different, we're seeing a different way to approach the game, no matter if he's just learning. But for Gretzky, I'm not sure he's going to be the super outgoing personality type. That's not really him. But he's going to be somebody who knows what he's talking about. Obviously, he has endless stories. His network in the game runs so deep. You're going to get people on there on the show too. I think it's an amazing move. So props to TNT for going after him, and props to Gretzky for taking this. I think it's awesome.
I'm curious, Colton, as the Edmonton Oilers contributor here at the Hockey Writers, what do you think of Wayne Gretzky doing this? Do you think he's going to be good enough for the job?
Yeah, I mean, like Brandon said, it's really good for the game. Like it helps them market more and just expand to more people that may have never tuned in otherwise. That being said, I don't think it's going to be like you said, TNT with like the NBA guys like Shaq and Chuck. I don't think he's going to be on there saying anything too controversial or anything like that. I think he'll play it pretty safe. Obviously, he's got a very good reputation just amongst everyone. Really, he hasn't really done anything to get himself in any type of trouble or anything, so I don't expect him to on this. I think he'll, like I said, play it pretty safe, but regardless, it'll be interesting to listen to him. Obviously, I don't think that you could say that there's anyone more knowledgeable about the sport on the planet, so I'm looking forward to it and just seeing what he has to offer.
And any last opinions to add there, Avery?
Yeah, just tacking on what other people already said. I think he's incredibly knowledgeable. Like, there's no way he's not. I saw a tweet the other day from Thomas Drance talking about how he had a conversation with him about Florida Panthers lines in like 2012. Like, Gretzky just showed up and was at the game and then just talking about line combinations. So he stays involved with the game. He knows what's going on. Obviously, that's a huge deal. He's not just going to coast in and be like, "Hey, I'm Wayne Gretzky." I think he'll work best not as like the main star of this TNT panel. I think it would work really well with him being an addendum to other charismatic guys that they find. I don't think it's going to be his role to be the super loud and charismatic guy. I think they have to find other guys who can do that, which is not going to be easy. That's not what hockey is known for per se, but there's definitely some guys out there, and I'm really hopeful for this TV deal, both with ESPN and TNT. I'm really hopeful for the future of hockey with it, and I hope they get off on the right foot.
Absolutely. And with that being said, I think it's time to wrap up the show. So thanks again, guys, so much. We thank you for joining us. This has been Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers. So make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube, follow and share on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at Sabres Scoop THW. And a big thank you again to Avery and Colton for joining the show today. It was great to talk about some teams that are actually playing meaningful games right now. It's always fun to get another team's perspective. So really enjoyed that. And once again, make sure you head over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter so you don't miss the latest and weirdest hockey news every day. And don't miss out on all of the other great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com. So finally, for Jordan, Avery, and Colton, this is Brandon, and this has been Sabres Scoop. Until next time.